Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 240. My name is NBZ, and for once, I'm not the one with a cold on this show. It's a historic moment, an event that should be marked in history. I'm joined by Bally, who has just been knocked for six, apparently. How's it going, Bally?
Well, they don't warn you enough when your kid starts at nursery that, you know, this is what happens, you know. Bally Jr. started nursery in January, and it took us, 2 full weeks, and then, blam, he got ill, we got ill, been off work all week, but here I am.
You're still alive, still kicking.
Still alive.
And somehow managed to play some video games while doing so, though I'm sure it was a struggle to do so.
Yeah.
I think that's just something you just have to get used to now, right? It's like,
God.
Kid goes out into the world, brings back diseases, and they all pass on to you. That's the thing as a parent, isn't it?
Time ill off work is now just such hard work because you're looking after an ill child who is harder to look after because they're ill, and it's harder to look after them because you're ill.
Right,
so you're mounting those two things on top of each other. And then, the idea of him coming home from nursery and then being able to work on top of that is just like, it's hard. So because the second they're ill, they're not allowed to be at nursery because they're going to infect other kids. So,
exactly. Yeah.
It's just
to perpetuate it.
It's a nightmare. Oh, and of course you have to pay for the nursery anyway.
Great. Yes.
You don't get any discounts, so that's all fun.
It's all good stuff. Hey, you're here, ready to talk about some video games. Although the extent to which that will happen, we'll see. Given
I'll say
there
a
is
few
a game.
things. I always talk in quite limited sentences, so
sure. Yeah. It's all good. We're going to talk about some video games today. One in particular that is a biggie. But Ballard, do you want to let the fine folks at home know what today's show is going to look like? Absolutely. We also should shout out that we have a survey ongoing, which, just tell us your thoughts about the show. Lots of different things. That will be linked in the description for both the YouTube and for the podcast version. But you can also find it. I believe it's pinned to our Twitter at the moment, maybe. Maybe it's not.
Yes, pinned to Twitter. Yeah. And I might add everyone on Discord again.
Sure, yes.
It'll be open for another couple of weeks just after the next show.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have not done that yet, it's basically just a nice little helpful thing to let us know what you think, but also what direction we should be taking the show in for different things that we're doing, that sort of stuff. I think it's just a helpful little exercise. It won't take many minutes of your time, so appreciate anyone going and doing that. But Bally, it's happened. Finally, our long nightmare is over. You know, Nintendo, they don't make many games in this franchise, but finally they've come back with another one.
Churn them out.
They certainly do. I imagine you are quite annoyed by the fact that the love that this has been given, considering that Advance Wars, a remake, is still not out. That's been delayed for ages and ages, which seems like it might actually be coming soon, given some little rumors things in the pipeline. So maybe you'll have your time to shine with some tactics. But today is my time to shine with some tactics, all right? Because Fire Emblem Engage came out last week, usually with podcast recording times, it tends to work out that it's like, well, it came out on a Friday and we're recording on the Sunday, so let's NBZ just get in as much time as you can with Xenoblade to talk about it. I didn't have to do that this time, which was nice. I had a whole weekend to just play the whole thing myself, and then the rest of this week I've been playing it, and I've gone on a journey, let's say, with Fire Emblem Engage. So my in-game timer, I'm going to check it actually. I believe my in-game timer says that I've played for 39 hours on this save file.
I can't believe you've not beaten it yet. You've had that whole extra week. What's going on?
Exactly. So 39 hours. However, that does not tell the full story here because I started this game on normal and I played about 2 hours on normal, and then I was like, seems quite easy. I don't know if I want to continue doing this. So I decided, because this game in its infinite wisdom, and I wish that they would change this. I hope they change it for the future. But you cannot change the difficulty up. You can only change it down. So in order to play on hard and to kind of try that out, I would have to restart the entire game. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. I can probably skip through it pretty quickly.
That's so annoying.
It is incredibly frustrating, and I think it's so dumb, and I don't know why they force you to do that. It's incredibly stupid, and in the day and age of the accessibility that we have, and changing things on the fly, games that allow you to do that everywhere across the spectrum, for some fucking reason they think this is still a good idea.
Did you know this was the case when you increased your difficulty, or was it like,
I did know this was the case, yeah, because this is just the way it's worked.
Because other FEs do it as well, right?
They do, yeah. I think since Awakening, maybe it's been like this. The only difference here is I don't think you can change from classic to casual or vice versa either. So I'm on classic and there's no way for me to change to casual at all. Like it can't be done basically. So you have to really be committed if you're going to be doing this. But then I was like, all right, I'll just replay through the first 3 chapters, and I actually skipping all the cutscenes. Like I know people have been talking about this game in terms of the story is very light and it's pretty terrible, and we'll get into that. But it took me 25 minutes to do it the second time. So 2 hours to 25 minutes. Like I did turn off all battle animations and stuff like that, but like just doing the fights, it wasn't very long. So it shows that there is actually quite a lot of like narrative and story and cutscene stuff up front in this game anyway. So that's an extra like 2 hours if you put those 2 times together. And then I kept playing through the game on hard, and the game has been a real challenge, and I think like a really enjoyable challenge, a challenge in a way that feels fair and warranted.
Like Fate's Conquest level of challenge?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I would say that this on hard is about, for me, where Conquest on normal was, which just says how fucking hard Conquest is, because like that game is brutal. But like it's maybe a little bit above that, I would say. But it's one of the more challenging experiences I've ever had with Fire Emblem, and like one of the more fair challenging experiences. And then I got to chapter 10, and I got to a boss where I was like, okay, this is stressful. The game does have its rewind functionality, right, where you can if you mess up a turn, you can kind of turn the clock back to previous turns, not having to restart the entire map over, which is a great feature. It's been in every game since Echo, so Echo's introduced Mila's turn wheel, and then in Three Houses they had Divine Pulse, which is a version of it, and so now they have another version of it. They kind of explain it, but it's really just like...
And it's limited, you can't just keep...
It's limited, right. This is the important thing. So on normal, it isn't limited, it's actually infinite on normal, which makes it even easier, but on hard, it's limited to 10. And on this boss fight in chapter 10, I used up every single fucking one of those charges, because this boss is just like fucking brutal. So like I barely scraped my way through this boss. I'm like, holy shit, sweating. Then I go into chapter 11, and chapter 11 is like an escape map where you're like running away, and like all this stuff has been taken away from you. You're almost like depowered. They basically take all your like cool things away from you, and you're like trying to escape. And like the stress of doing those 2 chapters back to back, I was like, oh boy, I don't know if I can do this. I was like, I was shook. And so I decided, I will keep a save file. I'll keep a backup save file on hard, but I will just drop my difficulty back down to normal. So that's what I did. I dropped it back down to normal. And then what happened was I played through 3 more chapters on normal, and there was the moment on like Sunday, I think, when I was on the phone with my parents and with my sister, and we just had a family call basically. And I'm usually like, it's usually my mum and my sister just talking about some inane bullshit, and I'm like, kind of half paying attention, but also, when it's my time to chime in the conversation, I will. But usually I'm either playing Overwatch or I'm playing something at the same time, just because my mind, and I'm sick about this, is a problem with it. But like I just have to feel like I'm doing something while I'm on this phone conversation. So I'm playing this chapter in Fire Emblem, and like I'm talking and paying attention to the conversation, and I'm just like breezing through this map. Like I don't have to think about it. Like I'm barely engaging with the main mechanic, the quote-unquote engage mechanic of the game. And like I get to the end of that map and I'm like, that was not satisfying at all. That was not, it just felt like a nothing burger. I was like, what is the point? What is the point in me playing through this game on normal where it's just not going to satisfy my desire? And at this point, my normal file was now 6 hours beyond where my previous hard file was. So you know what I did? I decided, let's go back to hard again. So I went back to my hard file after chapter 11, and I replayed those 3 maps again on hard. So I probably have about 8 hours unaccounted for in terms of the save file. So yes, though my save file says 39 hours, it's probably closer to like 46, 47 total. So I'm closing on 50 hours here. And by the end of this weekend, I'll definitely be over 50 hours into this game.
Are you going to keep limping along with both files till the end of the game then? Like, how are you going to do it?
So now I have committed that I am just... Well, here's the nice thing, right? This hard file, I can now overwrite my previous normal one, right? And I can drop down to normal if I wanted to, but keep where I was on hard. So like there's kind of a leapfrogging situation here where I can always keep a backup save file.
System, honestly.
It is stupid. But here's the thing. I think this game fucking rules from a combat standpoint. And like now that I'm over the hump, because one of the problems that I had was like I wasn't quite keeping up level wise, and like the characters I was using a lot of the kind of starting characters. What I tend to do that with Fire Emblem games is they give you lots of characters in like the classic GBA games, like Fire Emblem 6 especially, throws like, here's Wendy. Like, who the fuck is Wendy? She's just like an armored knight at level 1 who's pink and like is completely useless, and like you never have any reason to use her. And by the time she shows up, all your characters are like level 11, so it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with Wendy? And like this game has a lot of Wendys, except all the Wendys are good. All the Wendys are like, you know, level 12 paladins and shit, right? Like they're actually throwing tons of good units at you. But I tend to be someone, on a first playthrough anyway, of a Fire Emblem game, to choose the people at the start and kind of stick with most of them, you know, and if not, then I'll kind of substitute people here and along the way. But some of the starting characters are not fantastic, and so they feel a little bit weaker. And I think I was just struggling around chapter 10 or 11. But also chapter 10 and 11 kind of put a little bit of kind of restriction on your resources as well, and just make things a little bit trickier. But now that I have managed to kind of get past that hump, like I'm feeling more in line with it. I'm leveling up a bit better, and now I feel in a great kind of place. Yesterday I did chapter 17, which the Discord was warning me was going to be like a brutal chapter, and it's a fucking brutal chapter. It has 6 bosses on the map. They will just rush towards you. There are a couple that come together at the same time, and like trying to map it out and make sure that you're in position, all that sort of stuff. Really tricky. But it was so incredibly satisfying to like master that and like understand it and like position everybody and use everyone to their fullest potential, and it was just fantastic. So that's the baseline here. I've gone on a bit of a saga of a journey to get to this point, but now I feel pretty safe and secure where I am on hard classic, and I think that for me is the way that I have to play this game, because as I said, playing on normal, it just felt like there was no pushback, right? So the core mechanic of this game, the engage mechanic, right? The whole idea is that, so you can get slightly into the story, but basically there are these rings, right? These emblem rings, these bond rings, and
engagement rings.
Yeah, that's the pun, isn't it? Right? Fire Emblem Engage, and the main thing is their rings. So, but you're not getting married to Ike or whatever. He's just like your buddy. And all these rings have the souls, like the ghostly souls of past Fire Emblem characters from the series, right? So you get a ring that has a Lyn in it, and Lyn has a bunch of powers that you can use, and so you give that to a character, and they get benefits, all the benefits that she has, essentially. And, you know, all these different characters bring with them a set of different abilities, and when I was playing on normal, it felt like I just didn't need to use them. You know, maybe I would use them on bosses, but I wouldn't use them during the level. And when you look at the way that these levels are laid out, they have recharge spots. So the way that the mechanic works is that you can basically have it equipped to somebody, and you get like some kind of slight passive bonuses for having it equipped. But if you press the engage button, then for 3 turns, you will have a Super Saiyan, basically fully powered up character. And that character can do a bunch of things. So Lyn, for example, who's probably my favorite one in the game, so I gave Lyn to Etier. Etier is my archer. She's my god tier archer. I always have an archer who I lean on for the whole game, who becomes my favorite unit. Etier is that unit in this game. She's fucking fantastic. Give her a longbow. She will murder everybody. All the flying units, they're just going down to her no matter what, right? And I gave her Lyn, and so she, already good, now becomes fucking god tier, because what Lyn can do is Lyn can fire a shot, an astral shot, which goes across the entire fucking map. So I can shoot the boss from the beginning of the stage, essentially, with this powered up move that basically takes down a whole health bar. She can also create 4 illusory doubles of herself with 1 HP. So she creates these 4 kind of like bots that stand around and protect her, and the enemies are just baited to kill them instead of going after your characters, which is fantastic. So it's a good like diversionary tactic, as well as just generally powering up your character and giving extra abilities. There's so much stuff you get when you have an emblem or an engage thing attached to a character, which is why they limit it to 3 turns. And so like the reason that this is important is because on hard, you really do have to use that mechanic even at the start of maps, right? Because enemies will come at you and they'll be much harder to kill and be overwhelming you, and so you have to rebalance that by using this engage mechanic in your favor in order to kind of like get rid of one who's annoying. Or like, you know, Ike, for example, has a move called Great Aether where he kind of goes into a defensive stance for a turn and just kind of sits there like shielding, and then afterwards any enemies that have attacked him in a radius take massive damage because he then basically explodes and does a big attack, and it will burst out and kill, like, you can do like 7 people at once if they're all surrounding him. So you can kind of like send him into an area, bait everybody out, and then explode. And then you can pair that with like Lucina's ability, which I have on my main character, where they have a shield. So they can do a shield that gets the 4 characters who are adjacent to them. So you get into these really interesting combos where, you know, one person with Ike is sitting there in the center. Lucina's ability is shielding them, so they can take as much damage as possible, have all the enemies swarm on you, and then boom, Ike explodes next turn, and they're all gone. So there are some really interesting kind of combat synergies you can do that you just don't need to engage with on the regular difficulty, and I think that's why hard makes sense here, because it feels like you don't need to recharge or use those moves on kind of just regularly going through the game. So that's why, for me, it has stepped up so much more by playing this way and kind of like giving me that challenge. And it has been very, very satisfying to do. I think the game narratively is just a little bit strange, right? It's very basic. It's so basic to the point that watching the opening cutscene and then getting about 30 minutes into the game, I pretty much called the end game twist as soon as, like, I was like, oh, okay, that's what the twist is here. And I haven't got to that twist yet, but like everything they're doing is like, well, yeah, this is obviously the twist. Like, it's so, I think, unconcerned with being interesting or complex or having any sort of depth.
Is it like a GBA narrative though? Is it a bit
honestly
more simple, you know?
Honestly, I think that's an insult to the GBA narratives, because the GBA narratives actually had some interesting character stuff going on and like were still well written, yeah. And as simple as it was, like, actually had good character motivations, and you could tell who these characters were. And I think one of the things that like Awakening did, you know, since Awakening, that every character kind of has this like crutch that they lean on of like their personality is that they like tea, right? Oh my god, you will hear a lot about fucking tea and muscles and training in this game, because that seems to be every fucking character trait that everyone has. But like in Awakening, Gaius, for example, Gaius is a character who's a thief, but he loves sweets, and that's the character trait. He loves sweets, right? And I feel like that has persisted throughout the games. Three Houses got away from it by having these separate kind of classes of characters. You know, you chose one kind of group, and because it was a smaller cast, they could go a lot more in depth with it. Like, I remember, you know, support conversations with Dorothea and like stuff about class, because she's a commoner in a kind of noble world, and like very interesting, like her positioning, you know, as a woman in that space, but also from a lower class background, and like how she kind of navigates things. Like, actually interesting stuff going on with the characters in Three Houses, like a level of nuance in those support conversations, but also in the main narrative, far beyond anything any other Fire Emblem game had done. And this really does feel like hitting the reset button and being like, no, let's just go back to dumb, stupid cartoon stuff. Doesn't make any sense, is really, really surface level.
I associate what you're describing the most with those 3DS games, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think it was Awakening that introduced those kind of side conversations you could have.
So those have always been in the series. But
have they?
But previous to Awakening, the support conversations could only ever happen on the map, right? So on the map you would build...
Right, they were just a little less frequent, right.
Yeah, because you would build them up on the map, and then on the map it would be like, oh, I can talk to someone on the map right now, so you could only do them there. Whereas in a post-Awakening world, the other thing with pre-Awakening was that when you did support conversations, you could only have 5 total for each character throughout the game. So that meant you could only get to A rank with one pair, basically. So like, I don't know, Dorcas and who else is from Fire Emblem 7? Eliwood. Say Dorcas and Eliwood could get to A rank together, but then Dorcas and Florina could only get to B total, right? So you could only have one A rank with a character. And Awakening changed things by not only limiting it so that you didn't have to, or taking away the limit that you had to do it on the map. You could do support conversations in the menu after maps, but also anyone could support conversation with anyone all the way up to A, but then they also cut it off at an S rank, and the S rank was where people got married and then had kids, right? So that's what they did with Awakening. And ever since then, they've made support conversations a much bigger part of the game, basically, which is why I think you would think it's only got introduced in Awakening. It became more important, I think, as the series went on.
Just all of those, like, I like tea, I like candy.
Yes.
It was kind of, I very much associate that with the 3DS.
Yeah, totally. But, like, at least, even though Awakening did that, and I think Fates is also at fault for this, and Fates is definitely even more worse written than I think Awakening actually is quite well written. Fates is just badly written, and I think Engage is, like, even worse. I think Engage is the worst written game in the series by a long shot. And
how did that happen?
I don't know, honestly. I have no idea how or why, but
so apparently this game is much more just intelligence systems, and they didn't use
Tecmo Koei, right? Which is interesting because, like, it seems like Tecmo Koei, I guess, like, have good writers, or at least they brought on good writers for Three Houses. Because, man, the narrative in that game is way, way better.
Maybe they've got, like, a localization team or something.
I'm not sure. Yeah, but it does. It basically boils down to, hey, I'm the divine dragon. I've been asleep for 1,000 years, and I wake up. And okay, here's the best way to illustrate how little I care about this story. Right? Okay, so you get to, I don't know, chapter 3 maybe. So this is spoilers for the beginning of the game, but it honestly doesn't fucking matter because the story is so bad that being spoiled on it is just like it's not a big deal. So skip ahead if you want to, but I wouldn't say it's worth it. So you wake up and you're like, oh, what am I doing here? Who are these people? I've got amnesia, because classic, that's the way things are. And you go to meet your mother. Your mother is like the goddess dragon, basically, and she can turn into an actual dragon. You can't turn into a dragon, at least yet. Maybe I do at the end of the game. That's probably a reveal, I imagine. Given the way this game goes, I'm definitely turning into a dragon at the end of this game. Like, there's no way I'm not, essentially. So you go to the castle, and she's like, hey, hello, and you have some really bad dialogue, and there's a really awkward line that I posted to Twitter, like a line read, which feels like they took a line from one and spliced it into the other. It's like a bad podcast edit, you know. Like, I think also I pick up on this stuff more easily because we do editing of podcasts, but like I can tell when a cut has happened, and like, but this one is so fucking obvious. It's just like, why? Like, it just sounds so off and weird, and so you get like very light information about who this person even is. Like, there's no emotional attachment here whatsoever. You get to the end of the chapter, and some dark person with a hood comes in, and, you know, and then she turns into a dragon. She's like, oh, I'm going to fight you. And then she gets hit by something, and then she's like, oh, no, I'm dying. And then Fram, who's your healer, tries to heal her, and she's like, no, I've tried to heal her, but she's still dying because there's some dark magic or something. And so, you know, your character is on the floor with your mother, who you've only just met because you have amnesia, so you don't remember her at all, have zero emotional connection to, and this mother is dying, giving a speech for, like, I don't know, 10 minutes, and you are there. Your character is just, like, bawling their eyes out. Like, to be fair, the voice actors are doing as good a job as they can with the material they're given. It's really the material that's the problem, not that the voice actors are doing great, but it's just, like, the material is pretty fucking rough. And so, you know, this queen is just, like, dying, and, like, and literally as this is happening, I'm on my other monitor and I'm just scrolling Twitter. Like, I'm so fucking checked out. I'm like, this woman is dying. This is supposed to be an emotional point, and I'm like, all right, let's just wait for this cutscene to. Oh, okay, yeah, she's saying some stuff. Oh, what's happening? Oh, what's going on with Hi-Fi Rush? Oh, that looks cool. You know, like, I'm on Twitter, like, doing this stuff while this cutscene is playing out. That is how fucking checked out of this game I am.
I don't think you've ever been that checked out of the Fire Emblem story.
Well, yeah, and it's just. It doesn't warrant your attention. It does not warrant you paying attention to it. And to be frank, that is totally fine. Because in a weird way, despite Three Houses, like, having such a great narrative and support conversation, all that sort of stuff, at the end of the day, I am a little grubby tactics boy. And I you know, as much as I like narratives being good in Fire Emblem games, I kind of don't care if they are good or not. So the fact that the kind of map design and the combat stuff is so good, it kind of softens the blow, right? It's like, well, I can kind of listen to these support conversations if I want to, and, you know, they add some, like, there's some fun ones later on, there's some fun stuff going on, but it's not something that I really need to care that much about. So, you know, I'm okay with kind of just breezing past it and being like, oh, and, you know, it does get kind of interesting. Like, there are moments where things happen, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool, but then you can also very clearly see exactly what's happening, and it is a cartoon, right? Like, you know, if you went back and watched kids shows back in the day, as an adult, you can very clearly see, like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen here because it's telegraphed. But that's because it's telegraphed in a way for it to work for kids, right? Like, that's kind of what this feels like in a way. It's like, you dumb children, here's your stupid cartoon that you're going to watch. And that's basically the energy that it brings, which is totally fine. And I think it fits with the tone of the game because aesthetically, the game is very anime, right? Like, it has that kind of, like, cartoonish, like, poppy feel. But the game is so much prettier than Three Houses was. Like, Three Houses had a big problem where it was very grey and kind of, like, grounded, but also, like, it felt jaggy, like there wasn't anti-aliasing going on, like it felt like there were technical issues kind of holding it back. And I know everyone goes on about the Switch is old and we need to change it, all that stuff. Honestly, playing this both on TV and handheld in bed, like, you wouldn't know it. Like, it looks fucking fantastic. And I think part of the reason is that they double down on the things that matter, which is the characters, right? And Xenoblade did a little bit of this as well, where Xenoblade, like, went full in on, like, the visual design of the characters and how good they look, which kind of distracts from, like, sometimes the environments are not as, like, high-textured or whatever. And you can see this very clearly in the support conversations, where the characters are, like, sharp as fucking hell. And then the backgrounds, I don't think are actually 3D environment. I'm pretty sure the backgrounds are just fucking PNG images, right? So, like, the thing is, it doesn't really matter, though, because the focus is on the characters. You're not really paying attention to the backgrounds, and they're kind of, like, lightly blurred in a way where you get that sense of place and where they are, but you don't need to worry about, rendering a full 3D environment for stuff like that. And same with the cutscenes, right? Like, I think it's a smart way that they've kind of gotten around some of the environment design maybe being a little less interesting. But then also, when you finish a map, weirdly, they have modeled every single map in this game fully, in the sense that, usually in these games, when you zoom down to the character level, right? In the GBA games, you would zoom into another screen and it would be like, kind of a block of grassy plain and kind of generic. It wouldn't be like exactly the map and what it looked like. And you kind of zoom in and they do their animation, that would be that. And over the years, they kind of just zoom to, like, more generic looking spaces that are, like, representative of the area you're in, but not exactly like the space you're actually standing in. This is the first game where the space you are literally standing in is the space you can see on the map. So if you're standing next to a windmill, you will zoom in and you will see the full 3D windmill next to you, right? Like, they actually model the entire map, which is very cool from a battle perspective, zooming in for the animation, but then also, after every map, you can then start running around the world. And so every map you finish, you then start running around the full 3D environment of the space. And, like, it looks really good. It's just super well modeled, and it's a nice little thing you do at the end. It's kind of pointless because all you do is you can go around and you can talk to people, but everything everyone says is very generic, and there are a lot of repeated lines in there, and it's pointless to do so. But you can go around, you can adopt animals, and that kind of goes back to your Somnial thing, your kind of farm. And you collect these things called bond fragments, which are things that you basically use to power up the relationships between the emblems. There are a lot of systems in this game, and I don't want to kind of drill too hardcore into it because it just gets into a bit of the minutia, but you essentially have the ability to pass on skills from emblems to characters. So my healer, for example, Fram, she has a skill from Micaiah, which basically means that when she heals an ally, she also heals 50% of the amount that she healed to the ally. So if she heals 12 HP to the ally, she gets 6 HP healed back to her, which is a godsend because it means that she can stay at a healthy HP amount without having to use another healer to help her out. So she can reliably be your main healer, at least for the beginning of the game, to kind of get you through. But also crucially, there are a bunch of new mechanics that have been added that make each character and each kind of type of unit more interesting. So we haven't really gotten to the break mechanic yet, but for Fram, so Fram has this ability called Chain Guard, so she's a healer, but she's also a martial artist, so she has fists, and so fists are actually more effective against bow wielding units and dagger wielding units and magic wielding units. So you have the traditional weapon triangle of axe beats lance beats sword and sword beats axe, right? That's the traditional weapon triangle. But then you also have, how do you break the stance of someone with a magic spell or with, other stuff like that? you have to use a monk. So Fran becomes very useful to use her fists to break through other people. But she has an ability called Chain Guard, which is essentially a kind of like defense buff move where she stands next to an ally and she will take a hit for them, but it will be a reduced damage. So, if she stands next to Diamant, for example, and he's out in front, like taking damage from somebody, if she's at full health, she can Chain Guard with him, and then he won't take the damage, she will block it for him. But you can only Chain Guard when you're at full health, which is why this whole ability where she heals herself when she heals allies is so useful, because by doing that, you can always make sure she is at full health so that she can be a defensive blocker for other characters on the field. So really interesting stuff synergy-wise going on there. And this is like, throughout the game, there's so much of this going on. There is this new ability called Chain Attacks, where certain units who are backup units, so, usually kind of ground-based units with axes or swords, they'll have this ability to jump in if they are adjacent spaces to another unit. So if Diamant is standing next to Alir, the main character, and she attacks somebody, he will jump in first to do like 5 extra damage, basically. So if you are positioning yourself correctly, you can have multiple of these backup units doing chain attacks at the same time as your character to give additional boosts on top of that. So it just adds so many layers to the tactic. So not only do you have this entire engage mechanic where you're calling on these powers of these rings that are super broken and doing really, really great things to kind of get you through these hard enemies, but then you also have these additional things, these extra kind of layers of the mechanics being put on there that I have found really, really helpful, and just adds an extra tactical layer that I think, like, map design wise, this game is very, very much like the GBA games, but I think it feels better than that because it has so many more options for tactical things that you can do, right? And that's where it kind of separates itself. So I wouldn't say that the map designs are on the level of something like Conquest, where like it really is all about the space and the placement, but there is a lot going on here, and there are certain maps where, for example, there is one early on where, it's like chapter 12 or 13, where it's nighttime, so there's fog of war, so you can't see anything. There are these torches that you can light to kind of see through the space, see through the darkness. And there are these giant kind of blocks in the way that can only be destroyed by you attacking them, right? And so you have to break them down to kind of slowly get through this area. This is also the map you get Ike, and so Ike has an ability called Demolish, where he can just like smash these things in one hit. And so you're kind of using that to get through this space. And there's also the added pressure of there's a village and there's a bandit going for the village, and you can't really see where the bandit is because he's in the darkness, but you want to try and get there quickly so that you block him off from taking the item that's in the village. And this is really core classic GBA design, where maps are spaces in which there are treasure chests that are hard to get to, and those are it's almost like the star coins in Mario, right? Like, I use this analogy a lot, but these chests or these villages are basically that for GBA Fire Emblem, where the main challenge is like, just finish the map and kill all the enemies and kill the boss. However, to step things up a little bit more, to ramp up the pressure a little bit more, can you get to that village before a bandit destroys it? Or can you get to that chest before a thief steals from it and then runs off the map and takes the item with them? Classic GBA design, constantly happens in those maps. You're in a castle, a thief will pop up really high up on the map, and he will spend a couple of turns stealing from the chest and then trying to escape. And your pressure there is, as someone who plays Fire Emblem, generally quite kind of methodically, and I wait for enemies to come towards me. I slowly use my like big general character to kind of bait characters to take damage and all that sort of stuff. It encourages, it puts the pressure on for you to be a bit more aggressive, to be like, I need to figure out a way of sorting this shit out. So there's an early map where, there are 2 thieves that appear early on near where you are, but far enough away to where it's tricky, and also in spots where if you put someone out there, there are 3 other enemies who will swarm you and take you down. So like, I had to come up with a strategy of like, okay, I'm going to use Etier's far-reaching astral shot ability to take out one of them, and then another character can come in and finish it off, and then the other character on the other side, I'm going to put 2 characters there and 1 character up here to try and bait the different enemies towards them so that it doesn't just get 1 character targeted by all of them to be killed. Take out that thief with, 2 characters, using both their attacks to take them out, and like then dealing with the aftermath of like, okay, now everyone's coming towards you. And it is such a great tension that I really appreciate. And yeah, these maps really do feel like they come from that GBA school of design, where like the maps are interesting. They sometimes have those cool gimmicks of like, you know, fog of war and like demolishing stuff. There's also a map where you're on a beach and the water acts like the tides, right? So the water moves in and out, and if you're in the middle of the water when the tide is out, then your character can barely move, can only move a couple of spots. And there are patches of land that will not be touched by the water. So it's about waiting for the water to recede, then getting across quickly to the next patch, but also staying, you know, in mind of where enemies are respawning and stuff like that. And there's constant stuff like that where enemies will, you know, you'll start moving forward and then they'll pop up behind you. It does feel, and that's why I think I'm resonating so much with it, is it feels like that school of design taken to the next level, because you have so much more mechanical depth to work with and so much more to do in these spaces when you're kind of like contemplating, you know, your strategy. And I fucking love it. I think it really has scratched that part of my brain. Like I was telling you, I stayed up until 1 a.m. last night because I started a map and my brain just wouldn't let me go to sleep until I had finished it, right? Like this is the type of game where I will sit down and it'll be like, oh shit, 2 hours went by and I didn't even notice, because my brain is so engaged in trying to work my way around every kind of tactical decision that it really has enraptured me. And that is the critical thing about playing this on hard, is like if I hadn't done that, I think I would be very different on this game, frankly. And because the normal mode, it feels like normal mode should just be called easy, and there should be a mode between normal and hard that is the actual normal mode, but they have decided to kind of have this big gap between them. And what it does is it means that it's a bit tenser for me than I usually am used to with Fire Emblem games, but it is pushing me in that way. And it actually is making me think, like, you know, I liked Awakening a lot, partially because it felt like a power move game where you would just pair people up, they would become power couples, and you would just fucking just punch holes through armies, and you would barely have to think. They would take no damage. You would train up Donald, my big pot boy Donald, you would train him up, he would become a god, and you would just send him out into the field. Doesn't matter what enemies they were, they would all come towards him and crash against him like a wave, essentially, right? And that was great fun. I enjoyed doing that. But for whatever reason, I just don't feel that way with Engage. Like, playing on normal, even though it kind of is that, it wasn't the same power ramp, and so it didn't feel as satisfying as doing that in Awakening. Whereas something like Conquest was like, okay, we're going to give you limited resources, and, you know, this game is going to be very tactically challenging, so you really have to engage your brain for this, and that's what this game is doing. And I think the bosses are the most interesting part, where I can get through most of the maps pretty easily on hard, just going through the regular enemies, but you get to bosses, and I got to chapter 10, and that is where this boss just fucking, he unloads, man. So he's the one that you get Lynn's emblem from, and he, you know, he has the abilities that you get when you use her. So he gets the illusory doubles. He gets the shot that can shoot you from halfway across the map. And so it's a question of, like, looking at his range. His range is fucking massive, and you're like, okay, I gotta place someone here so that he is baited to attack them specifically, so that they take not as much damage. You know, I don't want my flyer in there, because if I've got Chloe in there, then she's gonna get destroyed. So it's like about baiting that, and then having 3 characters fully buffed up with Engage. And the problem is that he also, you know, is a Myrmidon, so is able to do crits pretty frequently, but also like super fast, so does like double attacks and is like doing 40 damage. Like at this point, none of my characters have 40 health, so it's just a really hard thing to get my head around and just like figuring out. And as I said, I did 10 rewinds on that chapter. I think I spent 3 hours on that chapter. One of those attempts was like me like running away from the boss, trying to skirt him around in a circle, kind of picking off the characters around him, because there's one character, you know, similar to how I can use the chain guard ability to block attacks, enemies can do that as well. So and that's the thing that makes this really balanced. Is I haven't even talked about the main mechanic here, right? The break mechanic, which changes everything with the weapon triangle, where if you use a sword on an axe, right? Traditionally in Fire Emblem, you get a kind of like boost in terms of your accuracy. So sword on axe, and you'll do a bit better, you'll do a bit more damage, stuff like that. But here, if you use a sword on an axe, the enemy can't retaliate. You basically break their stance. So you hit them, and then they can't do any damage back to you on that same turn. So that changes things significantly. It means that your army is kitted out in a way where you want to have multiple axe users, multiple lance users, multiple sword users, so that you can find that balance and be able to use those weapons to break enemy stances, and to then put them in a position where you can have a weaker unit come in and attack them without fear of retaliation, right? And I think that's a really smart change, but it wouldn't be a smart change if only you could do it. And because enemies can do it to you as well, it just makes positioning even more important of like, where do you put people? You're just really thinking these things through, right? And so enemies having all these abilities as well, bosses having multiple health bars, right? So in the past, one of the things I actually liked about the GBA games was you would get to a boss and they'd be like sitting on a throne and they wouldn't move. They would have no movement. So they would just sit there. And so there would be times where you'd be like, I've got a longbow here. I'm going to slowly do 2 health damage to you every turn until I slowly kill you. You know, there was a way around that. But also you were a bit weaker generally because you didn't have all those massive abilities and stuff on the GBA. So they could build bosses with like equivalent HP bars that you would have to throw everybody at them in order to take them down. And that's one of my favorite things about Fire Emblem is like, if a boss requires me to use every single character on my team to kill them in one round, that is a nice boss for me, because it's like really struggling with all my resources to just about make it. And these bosses feel like that because they have multiple HP bars, right? So you can like punch through and do a bunch of damage with certain characters, but then other characters are utility. So another really cool mechanic is that your thief, so characters that you daggers, they now have an ability that anytime they attack an enemy, they will poison that enemy. And what poison does is different from other games. So usually poison will like kind of take health down slowly over time. What poison does in Fire Emblem is that it essentially weakens the enemy defensively. So if you're poisoned, you are now open to take more damage from any other attack that hits you. So sometimes, even if it's like a boss that takes no damage from my thief, I will send my thief to do two damage times 0, and it won't do any damage, but it will inflict them with poison, and it means that someone else, the next person who attacks them, then does more damage. And you can stack this multiple times. So if you have 2 thieves or 2 people using daggers, you can do it twice and they will take even more damage. So you can stack it up to like 3 times, I believe. So it's just added, as I said, every layer of this feels like they've really thought through what is the balance here, what is the push and pull on every character, how do we have benefits and drawbacks for every single type of unit in this game. And it creates a tactical synergy and just like mental map in your brain where you are constantly thinking non-stop. The neurons are just firing off like a big old chess game, and I think it is really fantastic. And the bosses apply pressure by like, again, the GBA ones, they kind of sit in place. These bosses, they will just move towards you, and sometimes they will move without you activating them, and you'll have to deal with it, right? And part of that is something that I'm like, man, this game really feels like it wants you to be a bit more aggressive, but in a way that is also calculated so that you're not too aggressive, that you're kind of just throwing people out there to die. Not in a way where with Awakening, where you're just throwing people out and they can handle the world. These characters can't handle everything. Like Etier, who is my archer, who's a queen, she fucking kills everybody, but she can't take damage for shit. Like, if one person comes near her, they will kill her in 2 hits if they're fast enough, right? And so you really have to find that balance there of like positioning matters and protecting people. And, I got a dancer recently. Dancers have always been an interesting part of the series in that in the GBA games, they were good, but all they could do is dance. But now the dancer has the added effect of also having the kind of the martial artist fist move. So they can also now break enemies as well as being a helpful thing to kind of dance and rejuvenate. And there's also another emblem I got that can also do a thing called Goddess Dance, where they stand in the middle of 4 units and they can refresh 4 units at once. So like, there's a lot of different strategies you can take here by pairing things together to just like squeeze your way out of situations and find kind of tactical nuances. And all of this is kind of wrapped around, there is a kind of hub area that you go to, the Somnial, which is, it's basically the monastery from Three Houses, except far less important, and you don't really need to engage with it. But if I'm honest, like, I actually really like it because it is, and I've ended up spending like between half an hour and 40 minutes there every time after a fight. And the reason is that every fight is so intense with such high stakes that you feel the relief, right? There's almost like okay, I'm just going to go pet my dog for a bit, and feed him an apple or whatever, right? And I'm going to go fishing and do this dumb fishing minigame. I'm going to go fly a wyvern and do like a weird Star Fox minigame where I have to shoot targets. Like, that's in this game for some reason. And then you can kind of mess around with the rings. So like, Emblem rings all have kind of weaker rings, bond rings that you can form. So it's like a gacha system where you go into this room and you can basically do random pulls and you get characters from other games in the series, right? So if you do, I don't know, Erica, for example, you would get a bunch of characters from Sacred Stones, and their rings are, they give, buffs, they give, +2 strength or +1 dexterity, that sort of thing, but they don't give you the same abilities as the main emblem rings do. And because you only have a limited number of like big powerful emblem rings, the rest of your party should be equipped with these kind of lesser rings basically. And you can actually get ones which are S rank, and it's it's a random gacha thing, so you can fuse them together, but it gets very expensive to get an S one. You have to have like 4 A rings and like 10,000 fragments in order to get an S rank if you're going to forge them. But you can randomly get them, and I've got a few S rank rings, and some of them also have abilities as well. So Yunaka, my thief, she now has Marissa's S ring from Sacred Stones, and that has lethality and ability from Sacred Stones, which is really cool, where, there's a percentage chance that a critical hit just kills the enemy outright, basically. So it doesn't matter how much damage you do. Even if you do 1 damage, if it's a crit, it just fucking kills the enemy, basically, which is sick. So I now have that on her, and because she has very high dexterity, extremely high crit rate, it's going to pair very nicely. So, you get benefit stat buffs from them, but sometimes with the S rank rings, you actually get a little bit of an ability as well. So added layers there. There's the arena where you can kind of grind. It's a bit random. It's not like traditional Fire Emblem arenas. You just put a character in, they will randomly choose a character from the cast to fight, and they'll win or they'll lose, and it's just kind of up to chance whether they're up to the task of fighting them. And that gives you a little bit of XP to kind of catch people up. But for me, the best way of getting XP was to go into the skirmish maps, which honestly, I wish that they were a bit better balanced, because each skirmish map that they show on the map is quite a few levels above where your army is, and the way that the skirmish maps work is that all the enemies will just start rushing towards you. There's no bait, there's no like kind of standing in place and baiting enemies slowly. They'll just fucking rush towards you, which meant that when I was very early on in the game, I couldn't really grind, because I would lose a character on a skirmish map and they're dead and I can't do anything, and I'd be overwhelmed. However, there is a mechanic where if you game over, if you die and you lose characters, you can just say, I want to retry the map, but keep all the XP I had. So you can go in, you can kill a few guys, and then end up your whole army gets, bowled over, and you can just go again, and go again, and go again, and slowly you can actually use that to level people up. So that was kind of a way of me getting everyone to an advanced class, so I could be in a place where I felt a bit more stable and secure, and and now I don't think I need to do that anymore, because I've also got a bunch of paralogs. Paralogs return. The paralogs are basically side chapters, but they're chapters that tie into each character from these different games. So Lucina, for example, when you go to her paralog, it is set in Arena Ferox. Arena Ferox being, I think, Chapter 5 from Awakening. And it's a big arena. You'll recognize it very clearly if you played Awakening. But her map is just based in that map from that game. So it's a cool way of bringing back maps from previous games. I just did Linz recently. Linz actually takes place on the Sake Plains. And it's one of the maps that's actually one of my least favorite GBA maps. It's like the one with a river and a bunch of bridges and small islands. Like, quite iconic map, but one that I didn't like that much in GBA, so I was like, oh, okay, could have done a nicer one for this, but like, I'm excited to see what's the Sacred Stones map that they bring back, or what's the map from Three Houses, or Fates, right? Like, there are maps that I recognize from across the series that I know, because I've played these games so many times, that I think is a really nice touch there, and each of those paralogs all have, like, interesting things going on where, I just did one with Ike where I was like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like kind of like in this little cubby hole here, safe, and like slowly baiting enemies out and killing them. And then Ike comes through, and Ike just fucking destroys this barrier, which is like 10 blocks deep. And suddenly, like, everyone is on top of me all at once. I'm like, oh shit, I need to kill the boss and just get done with this, right? So there's a lot of variety there, lots of stuff to get through. I did Chapter 18 last night, which is a classic boat map. If you played Fire Emblem, you'll know that there's lots of boat maps in the series when you're on a boat on the sea, and, there's flyers coming from off the ocean, and, you're kind of in a central boat, and there are kind of other boats around you. A classic kind of traditional map that they always have, and and I think there are 26 chapters, so I still have 8 main chapters as well as probably like 8 paralogs to go. So despite being 46, 47 hours into this game, there's a lot more to dig into. So I don't know. There's so much to talk about with this game. I've been talking like non-stop about it, but I think that's the hard thing, right? Like, I know the narrative is nothing, but there is so much rich depth that goes on here from a mechanical level. And even just hanging out in the Somniel, I think, is just a nice time. There's you can go and have meals with people that increase their stats. In fact, my main character had such bad strength growth that every time before a match I go into the training ground and I do push-ups, which is a stupid dumb mini game. It's basically just a timing rhythm mini game where you just press A bunch, like 25 times in a row, and then you get a strength buff from it. But I feel like for me it's actually necessary for me to do that because my character's not strong enough to handle enemies with the current strength that they have. So that's the thing. It feels like, and part of the reason why I just switch off normal as well is it feels like there's no reason or no point in engaging in any of those mechanics if you do play on normal, because you're so strong and enemies are so weak that it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, despite the ups and downs and the kind of like back and forth that I've had of like replaying stuff again and again, I would recommend, if you've played Fire Emblem games before and if you want to engage with the central mechanic of this game, the engage mechanic, I would recommend playing this on hard. At least start on hard, and then if it is just too brutal, then you can drop down to normal if you want to. Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones from a pure mechanic standpoint that I've played, probably since Conquest, honestly. And honestly, that kind of raises it above Three Houses for me. Much as I love Three Houses narratively, I think this, for me, is what I want from Fire Emblem, and it just feels like a nostalgia pull in so many ways, bringing back these characters, as little as they do with them, because you can have bond conversations with those Emblem characters as well, and those conversations are literally 2 sentences, where your character will be like, wow, you sure are strong, and the Emblem will be like, I train a lot. That will be fucking it. That will be the conversation you have for their C rank, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing with this game? It's so bizarre. But anyway, I think that in the areas that this game has invested in, it has absolutely soared. So yeah, strong recommendation, I would say. But also, look, if you're someone who came to the series with Three Houses and you love it because of its rich characters and its world building and its storytelling, and you were like, okay on the tactics, but you didn't really care that much about the tactics, don't fucking play this game. Just don't bother. There's literally no point. You will get nothing out of it. This is one for the tactics goblins, and that's me. I'm a tactics goblin.
Do you think for the next game they'll try and be a bit more blend the two, perhaps a bit more story rich, but keep the tactics?
I honestly hope that is the case. I did tweet like I would be cool with them going back and forth, like one entry is a more narrative based one that's a bit easier on the tactics and doesn't invest as much in that, and one of them is like a GBA style game where it's just pure map design. And I would like them to get... I just don't know that they can do both at once. I don't know. Like, do they have to take the kind of map design team from Intelligent System and blend them with the narrative team from Tecmo Koei? Because it doesn't seem like that's how things are set up anyway with how they're doing this stuff. So, I don't know. I would love that to be the case. And I think that would be the best of both worlds, right? And, to some extent, Awakening is that a little bit. But I don't know. Awakening is also a very easy game. So, it's a hard balance to strike. I don't think there is a game in the series where the narrative and the tactics are on the same level. I would say Sacred Stones is probably up there. Like, I think Sacred Stones has one of the best narratives in the entire series. Characters and all that stuff. As simple as it is, I think it's really well told and effective. But yeah, I don't know. There's not that many of those out there.
I'm also skeptical how many reviewers who are reviewing Engage have even played the GBA ones at this point.
Oh, totally.
It's been such a long time that I think people's reference for what was their first Fire Emblem is constantly changing.
Constantly, and I think like there are 2 modern touch points for where you got into Fire Emblem. I think most people, like reviewers these days, most people got into it with Awakening, right? Like I think that was the first one for so many people. But then Three Houses, with Switch being so successful, has opened it up to an even more broader audience, right? So I think Awakening and Three Houses are the 2 kind of fan bases that we're speaking to here, and this game is a step up from both of those from a kind of complexity and difficulty standpoint. And I wonder, if reviewers... Because as reviewers, you're probably playing on normal, right? That's what makes sense. So, like, in that case, I wonder if, like, part of their issues with it is, like, well, this is also quite easy as well as the story being bad. So it's like, it's kind of this double-edged sword, right? Or maybe not. Maybe, for reviewers, normal is totally fine. It's just, people who have played a lot of Fire Emblem, I think it will not pose any challenge whatsoever. So... yeah, it's weird because I'm not the person, as we know from the show. We just play games on normal generally. I never really do difficulty level stuff. So this is one of those rare experiences where I'm like, actually hard is the way to go here, and it's
I think that speaks to how easy they made that normal. Then for you to actually feel like, actually maybe I should turn this up is a big deal.
Like totally. As I said, I was having a conversation with my family while doing this game at the same time and barely having to think about it. Right, I think that says quite a lot about where it falters in terms of kind of how, like, I just wish there was a regular easy mode, right? That should have just been easy mode, and you don't even barely have to use the engage mechanics, and they should have had a normal that, because I think hard is well balanced. It's just that sometimes on hard, the bosses are motherfuckers, right? They are just like, hey, how about you just die very quickly? And it's like, okay.
Why not even have a 10-point sliding scale,
Sure.
And you can adjust it before and after every chapter if you wanted,
Absolutely.
Like, I think there's just modern solutions to these issues that, I don't know, Nintendo
it's so frustrating. Yeah, it's so frustrating that they don't let you swap between classic and casual whenever you want. It's so frustrating they don't let you put the difficulty up or down if you want, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's this arbitrary bullshit thing that comes from like, well, no, it's like a kind of gamer, quote unquote gamer mentality of like, well, you need to have the save file so you did it all the way on hard all the way through. You can't just get to the end level and say, because then your save file will say hard, but then you can just change it whenever you want. It's like the people who think Dark Souls shouldn't have easy modes, right? It's like, fuck that. That's stupid. Like, just let people enjoy the game in different ways. So, I wish it was better. But anyway, as you can tell, I've played a lot of this game, and I will continue to play a lot of it. And I imagine I will be finished by the next time that we chat. But we'll see. I've got a lot of other stuff to play.
Really early in the year, like random January slot. This feels a bit weird. I don't know.
Totally. I think alongside Conquest, this is like my favorite tactics the series has had to date, so it's really, really up there for me in my mind. So really, really enjoying it. All right, Bally, I hope you've had your time for your voice to rest, so you can tell us about some video games that you've been playing. Disc Room, so both of us actually checked this out, but do you want to tell us about Disc Room?
Do you like running away from spiky discs? So like, I'm talking like Meat Boy style, they're going to cut you up kind of discs, because basically that's all you do in this game, and there's a whole lot of different types of discs. So you play as like this scientist on this planet, and it seems that the only thing that lives on the planet is discs. So you are in a series of top-down 2D rooms, and it's a bullet hell game, essentially. You're just avoiding discs. And depending on the room, the challenge changes. Sometimes it'll say, like, right, you need to avoid discs for 20 seconds, go. And then you're basically just avoiding discs for 20 seconds. And if you do it, you then unlock another room that's adjacent to the room that you've just done. So each room has its own set of tasks. And often they might have multiple tasks. So sometimes a set of rooms might have a cumulative period of time you need to avoid discs in those set of rooms to unlock the next room, and eventually you'll get to like a boss room, and then I think there's maybe 4 bosses in the game, and then like 3 bosses, then a final boss, and that's it. Like, it's just a 2 to 3 hour game of like constant bullet hell, avoiding discs, completing rooms to unlock more rooms, progressing. And it was just a really nice little game. It's on Switch. It was on Game Pass. To just switch off, listen to podcasts, and just use that action part of your brain just to like constantly avoid. And for me, talking about difficulty of Fire Emblem, like the difficulty of this game was absolutely perfect. Like I found that, sure, some of the later stages were tough, but they felt tough in a really good way. Like I never felt like I was completely banging my head against the wall for ages. And I should also say it's got an incredibly fast restart time every time you die, which is an important part to a game like this. And it's super simple, but it does what it says on the tin. There's discs, there's rooms, and that's about it. And I loved it. I think it's just games that have one idea and they run with it and they know when to end at the right time. We need more games like that. Like, this game is so good.
Yeah, I like also that it encourages you to die a lot, because one of the tasks that it has is like die to a specific number of discs, right? Because there are a variety of different types of discs.
Like,
so there
over
are
40 or something in the game. It's insane.
Yeah, so there are like giant big ones that spin around that are hard to avoid. There are mini tiny ones. There are ones that have 4 discs that then shoot out in different directions. There are like spinning top ones, like green ones that kind of go in a weird like kind of circular pattern. So yeah, lots of variety in terms of the types of movement that you're learning. So you're basically learning the movement of these objects and then using your abilities to kind of get past them. There are a bunch of different skills you can get as you go through. So one is like slowing down time, one is a dash roll, one is a
clone yourself, and
there's a clone yourself, there's a eat the disc one where you eat the disc into yourself and then shoot it back out type of thing. I think you also ended up just using the dash the whole time because the dash or the dodge roll has invincibility frames, and so it actually makes your survivability a lot higher, I found anyway, especially for those ones where you want to, like at the end of the game, trying to unlock this final room where you need to have a certain number of time total throughout those other rooms surrounding it. I really had to use the dash or the dodge roll a lot in that one just to get like right on the edge of, like, I think I had it by 1 second basically over the amount that I needed. It was pretty tough, you know. It definitely gets challenging towards the end there, and I think there's a little bit of confusion with it. I had to look up like how to open one of the rooms because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like, there's one room that's literally pitch black and you can't see your character. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, how do I get through this? Like, there are a couple of weird mechanics there where I had to. There's a room where it's like die with 4 discs in the room, but there are only 2 discs in the room.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does that work? And the solution is you have to go to a room where it has those ones that shoot out 4, and you have to absorb that into yourself. And that stays on your character, which I didn't know between rooms, and then you go back to that other room.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
And then you shoot that out. So I thought I had to do this in order to finish the game. I was like, I couldn't figure out another way of getting to that specific room that I needed to.
Do you have to do the 3 bosses to get the final boss? I thought you did. Yeah,
you do, because you can't get past...
different ways of getting to those 3 bosses, I guess.
Yeah, the layout of this thing is like you can zoom out and you see just a bunch of squares essentially, and all these squares are connected, so they're basically all the rooms connected together. There's like kind of a overview map, and there's a block at the very top where there's a pipe, kind of what do you call it? A block, basically a block and like a pipe essentially, where this one room you have to finish all the bosses in order to unlock the kind of top of the map, the final area essentially. Yeah. So yeah,
it's cool. Like, I think also you're doing like one of the sets of rooms, the time only passes when you're standing in like the inner circle, or there's another one where you're constantly collecting like these little orbs, not just avoiding discs, but collecting these orbs. And those can represent the time sometimes. Like, it's not always just you have to get to 20 seconds. It's like, well, you only get a second when you collect an orb, and you need to get to 20. And then it might say, right, you need 50 orbs between these 4 rooms or something. And you realize, crap, I need to really... There's like at least 13 orbs per room or something. It's like, it gets really tough at points. But, you know, I think the bosses are quite well designed. I thought the final boss was very good. The final area where you're kind of swapping between black and white tiles was a nice mechanic.
Oh, yeah, that was neat, yeah.
This is some really clever stuff, and like I said, just a simple idea but executed pretty immaculately. And I agree with you, it's a little unclear on certain rooms how to unlock them. And this is kind of game where it would have just been better if it was just a lot more clear on those kind of things, because it's just it's just that kind of game. It's not like a puzzle game, in my opinion. And,
it almost tries to get a bit more out of itself by being obscure, so that people have to spend time, because otherwise you can just kind of breeze through the game otherwise, right? And I do like that they don't have high requirements for survival time. Like 5 to 10 seconds is usually what you need to do, but there's always a developer time. And the fun thing about me playing this after you played it was when I jumped in, all your scores were there as well.
Right.
So I think I spent maybe a little bit longer because I was committed to trying to beat your scores on every level, which is a nice thing. Definitely, I think that it's good that they integrate that like into the game, because like every room you go into, it's like, oh, here's the leaderboard for your friend list right here, right? So it encourages that kind of like, you know, that Ollie World competitive behavior, which we always like to engage with.
And there's some rooms where it's like, right, if you beat 20 seconds on, I don't know, 15 rooms, this door will unlock, kind of thing. So like there's always like a secondary reason why it's good to do even better. And then that door unlocked this, that then creates like almost like a shortcut to the boss, or I don't know, like it's just, there's cool stuff there. And I found when I started the game, I thought, right, I guess this is the first area and there's going to be like 4 areas. And it's like, no, actually this is the only area, and it's just quite large and takes, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours. But like, yeah, it's really great little game. Would definitely recommend it. That's Disc Room, and yeah, it's on Switch. I would
check it out.
Highly recommend it. I think it came out a few years ago.
It's a great game to play in an evening. I basically played it because you had played it and you were like, oh, it's super short. I was like, I actually thought it was a roguelike. So I was like, oh wow, you can actually finish this. So after work one day, I just like hopped on. I was like, oh, just finished it, in a couple of hours, and it was really nice to do that. So yeah,
really good podcast game. We've also been playing Bertel Horberg's most recent game.
Yes.
Onion Assault.
Absolutely.
He announced it like a few months ago, and then I think he revealed, I've been working on this for like 4 years or something, which is crazy time scales. And yeah, I'm not sure 2023 was crying out for a Mario 2 inspired platformer, to be honest.
Sure.
And I think all the faults we would have with 2D Mario, I certainly have found with this game. I finished the game. Took me, I don't know, maybe 3 hours or so. And
okay.
Yeah, it makes me, we've talked about it a million times before in the show, but like live systems, checkpointing, this game is just very traditional in those two themes, and it's a real shame that I think holds the game back. And ultimately I think that live systems and checkpointing can't exist in and of themselves. Like, they do relate to how difficult the levels are or not. So I'm not saying that the game would suddenly be better if it just had infinite lives. I think that to a degree it matters the style of game you're going for, in the sense that, like, imagine Celeste with a live system, just wouldn't make sense. Like, that's the
impossible.
Point of the game. So I think that there kind of is a point to there being a live system, but these levels are quite easy but then still frustrating, and they're quite plodding because there's a lot of Mario 2 style, like you're picking up onions, you're picking up enemies, you're picking up things and throwing them, and it does make it quite slow paced. But sometimes the game will require you to be quite fast paced, like get over a jump, so there's like the run button. And as much as I like that juxtaposition with, say, a Donkey Kong game, there's something about this that I didn't really love. The whole chucking things and then running. Either I want a methodical, slow-paced throwing platformer, or I want a fast-paced jumping up and down. I don't like merging the two into one level that this game does quite a lot of.
Yeah, I've also found, I'm about halfway through the game, so I just finished World 2 yesterday, and there's just a lot of little mechanical things that bug me about it. The way in which you have to hold run, but also that's the pick up button. So if you pick up an onion...
Yes, that is a strange decision. Yeah.
Right, if you pick up an onion and then want to run, you throw the onion automatically. So it's like, well, that's a bit annoying. Then, like, the jumping in midair, the control on it feels weird and off in the way that you just don't... It kind of feels like a gamble every time you're trying to land on an enemy's head, because you don't know if you'll, like, land on top of them or slide off the side and get hit by them. Like,
feels quite slippy as well.
Very slippy. If you're standing next to an enemy, then the animation will happen and you'll be hit even though you don't think you can be hit by them. Throwing the onion, sometimes, if you're right next to an enemy, you'll just throw it over their head. Like, there are small little design things here that feel like they needed a bit more time to think through, and there's also not much incentive to go and collect stuff either, right? There's a bunch of coins in these levels. I think the biggest drawback is because the checkpointing is so bad, because you like have such long stretches of time where, if I fall down a hole, I'm just going back to the start of the fucking level again, right? And because of that, you get into this mindset, at least I have, where I'm like, oh fuck, I don't care about the coins. I'm just going to try and get back to where I was, because that's the kind of momentum you want. It's like, oh, I just want to get back to where I was, and then you get there, and then you mess up the jump again. You're like, oh, I'll just get back to where I was again. So it's this perpetual cycle where a first time through a level, I anyway was like, oh, let's collect the coins, let's do this stuff, and you're going quite slow, and then because you're taking quite a long time to get through it, by the time you fall in a pit and die, you're like, oh, that took me so long to get there. So you're like, well, there's no point in me going for these coins again, because it'll just take me just as long, and then what if I die again, right? And it's like trying to get to that next checkpoint, and then once you do, there's still limited lives, so you could mess up again and then have to restart the whole level from the beginning. And it's like, man, like, there is some smart stuff in here with, some of the riding enemies across gaps, and like some fun, like, picking up block stuff, and like, I like the general idea of going back to a Mario 2 thing, but I just wish that some of that old school design was just left behind, because it doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve... I think the only thing it serves is inflating the runtime of this game, which is just inevitably going to be quite short anyway. And I would much rather a more seamless, smooth experience. Like, I don't remember Gum and Clive having any of these issues, right? I think that game, those two games had...
I have a feeling Gum and Clive didn't have lives.
I don't remember,
and it just had, like, quite quick checkpointing.
in any case, the levels were definitely bite-sized in nature in a way that you never had to worry about that stuff, right? Whereas here, it's a constant worry, and there's a constant worry of like, oh my god, the fucking icicle level at the end where the icicles drop.
Ice returns later in another world. I was gutted. Yeah, there's ice physics.
But I was also like watching Nintendo World Report's review, and they were talking about how like the difficulty is all over the place, where like levels in World 1 and 2 are harder than some of the end game levels, and like there's just an imbalance there. It's like they were kind of randomly, haphazardly put in without thought of like how they would ramp up in difficulty, that sort of thing. And look, I like this guy's games a lot, you know, and we've played all of them. I'll continue to play them all because one of the things that he does excellently is like visually, this game runs at 60 on Switch, looks really nice, like very crisp and clean, like super nice visual style and aesthetic. You know, all of these games have that going for them, which I think is a great thing. And there's a smoothness to that presentation that I think is super great, and you don't see it oftentimes with kind of 2.5D style indie games, right? Which I really appreciate. But I just don't think it's quite there, right? Like it has some fun things going on, but it doesn't quite nail it when it comes to some of the fundamentals, and honestly just becomes more frustrating than enjoyable a lot of the time playing through it. So yeah, I don't know how you felt about like the bosses and stuff like that. I thought they were cool. Like
I like the bosses. I mean, the biggest drawback with the bosses probably is like the life system. Like if you die on the boss and then you game over, you'd have to start the whole level again. Like especially on maybe like the final boss. I had to come back to that final boss. I don't think I had to come back to him once, but it's still like, right, I'm going back through the whole level just to like, fight this boss again. Like, this is a bit brutal. It's like, this is kind of not what I expect for 2023. Like, I'm just kind of beyond that mindset. But I do like the bosses. But if you like bosses, you should really try out his other game, Extermination Force, which is just bosses. It feels like a light-hearted Cuphead almost in some ways, where it's just boss. It's just every level is just a boss fight, and some really innovative, well-designed bosses in there. And I feel like that game doesn't have a live system. I could be wrong, but it's just Extermination Force is by far the best game he's done since Coming
Absolutely,
Clive. And I think he's better at the run and gun than the pure 2D platforming. So that's what I'd hope he'd return to in the future. Although I know he is working on like a 3D fighter or something.
It's like a Punch-Out meets Souls style thing, which is really cool as an idea.
So we'll see what that turns into or how that turns out. But this game is so 2D Mario, it's ridiculous. Like the design of the enemies is so Goomba-like, and the end of the worlds are all Bowser Castle themed, and you know, I get it, but I don't know, there's this part of me that's just like, yeah, this is a nice homage too, but I think we're beyond homages to Mario.
You have to be doing something a bit different, and honestly, I don't think there's much like innovative going on here. Like it just feels like, this is Mario 2, right? There's not a lot of additional stuff on top. I think the only unique thing is like being able to pick up heavy things like bosses. Like you could pick up big bosses and throw them, and the one boss at the end of World 2 that's basically what's his face from Super Metroid, can't remember the name of the boss, the one that you push in the lava, right? The
one that you have to get all the way to the
exactly lava. It's basically that fun. Boss, which is a fun little twist. I thought that was pretty neat, you know. But yeah, aside from that, it is really much like, okay, pick up this thing and then throw it at the enemy, and you can also jump on the enemies and pick them up, right? It's kind of the fundamental part of it, and it would have been nice to have a little bit more innovation there, but also, just a bit tighter, more modern design is what would be nice. But anyway, you know, I still think it's a decent thing to check out and worth having a look at if you're interested.
Are you going to finish it?
I think I probably will. It's quite short, so
it is short. There's only 16 levels in the whole game.
Yeah, totally. So like I'll probably push through and finish it, but I would put this below I think I would say Extermination Force is my number 1, then Gum and Clive 1 and 2. I don't know which one I prefer, but 1 and 2, and then then Super Punch Patrol, I would say. I still like this more than Super Punch Patrol.
Yeah, I'd go with the same order.
Yeah.
Same order.
But yeah, I feel like Mario 2 probably worth taking a look at it and seeing if you want to get anything out of that. All right, well, that is going to be us for the first part of the show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break with your email. See you in a bit. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second half of today's show. Bally, of course, being a little under the weather, not able to do the full email read, so I'll be reading emails today. Bally, could you tell us one thing, one important thing, one crucial, necessary thing that we must say for this email segment, which I think we forgot last time because we didn't do emails. But if you want to write in to the show, where can you do that? What is the email address to send those emails to, Bally?
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Fantastic. You can also head over to our Discord server. There's an email thread there where you can post questions in, if you so choose that as your platform of choice. But I like traditional emails. It's a bit of an old school thing, but it's whatever way works for you. Our first email today comes from Chad from Nebraska, who says, "Hi guys, any thoughts on bringing back your jukebox soundtrack guessing game? Or if you want to steal from the official Nintendo Power podcast, which honestly kind of sucks, they use sound bites from animations like the da-da-da-da from Link opening a treasure chest. Completely changing the subject, I know you guys aren't huge Hollow Knight fans, but after seeing the reviews of Sports Story and hearing about the development nightmare, it makes me pretty nervous for Silksong. Any thoughts? Thanks as always for the great podcast, Chad from Nebraska." Thanks, Chad. Appreciate that. The Nintendo Power podcast is one of those things that is like, it's basically state propaganda, and I am just so morbidly fascinated by Nintendo state propaganda that I always listen to that podcast. It is terrible. Because they have to dance around everything, and now that Kit and Krista are out of Nintendo, they actually have talked about the Nintendo Power podcast before and how they were disappointed with how kind of toothless it is and has to be because of all the rules and regulations that Nintendo has about when they say stuff that we always call out all the time of the Splatoon 3 game, they have to say that every single time.
And I mean, that was one of my biggest criticisms of Nintendo Minute, was it felt at times quite toothless, and it had to be.
Right,
and
it had to be. And Kit and Krista talk about how they had to do that, basically. They knew how stupid it was, but there's weird legal stuff that they have to do.
And I will still back Kit and Krista and say I still think their podcast is progressively getting more and more reveal-y about I swear, if you listen to the first episode compared to now, they are shooting from the hip massively now, and it's very fun to listen to.
Definitely. I think their Patreon also answers some even darker, deeper questions.
Ooh,
so if you want to check that
God,
stuff
Nintendo
out.
must be furious. Some parts of Nintendo must be furious with them, I should say.
But they're good friends with Reggie, so I don't think he ever was too
But he was also a kind of shoot from the hip kind of guy, you see. I think they come from similar energies and
totally
held back by Japan.
Yeah, I guess so. It is weird, isn't it? Because you have that contrast in cultures when it comes down to it, and the kind of misunderstandings that happen often through translation and stuff. But in any case, that podcast does do they do a bunch of different games of we're going to do this quiz where we try and guess the game from 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, and the clues they give are basically well, if you don't get this, you're a fucking moron type of thing. It's very much it's very light, and it's very, obviously that's what it has to be. It's propaganda, it's promo, it's all that sort of stuff, and it's an interesting listen if you ever want to listen to it. But speaking about the jukebox, that's something that we'll bring back, of course.
Definitely, yeah.
Even though we're doing our 2-segment show going forward, jukebox is always there as a segment to come back to. Always a fun thing to do. So yes, it will be returning probably sometime soon, I imagine. So look out for it when it does. Always look forward to doing that. It'll be a fun time. However, Bally, let's get into the meat of the question. We actually think we kind of had discussed this a little bit ourselves of one highly anticipated sequel to a Switch beloved classic has kind of shit the bed and really not nailed it. Do you think it is possible for the same to happen to Hollow Knight when it comes down to Silksong? What do we feel?
Totally possible, but definitely not to the same extent as Sports Story. I think that is a hard level to get to, I think, personally. I think an underwhelming Silksong is potentially a lack of areas or a lack of variety or a lack of, there's something about the innovation and discovery and all these things with Hollow Knight that I think, in a similar way to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it's very hard to replicate that magic. And I think that's the issue Silksong might have, is how do you replicate Magic? And I guess that is arguably replicating Magic's like the difference between golf and Sports Story to an extent. But like I think that Team Cherry seem like A, they're a very small team, but B, they seem to have made such a seamless, slick game for such a small team.
Yes.
Like, arguably far beyond any other small teams I can think of in terms of like game feel.
Yeah,
it gives me a lot of hope.
I think when it comes down to it, right, you look at Golf Story, the original, and I think that had a bunch of issues at launch as well from like a kind of bugs and stuff standpoint.
Yeah.
But also, like, you know, Golf Story still had a lot of mechanical kind of junk in there, and it wasn't very smooth or polished. Like, it was up to a certain point, but Hollow Knight is like immaculate, right? Like, Hollow Knight is like a first-party Nintendo game. Like, I remember walking past the bushes and hitting them in Hollow Knight, and the way in which that, like, the background environment encourages you to just like interact with it, even though it does nothing. It just adds to the feel and the momentum of the world. Like, there's a level of quality that Hollow Knight started with that Golf Story even originally never came close to achieving, right? And I think that not to say that like, oh well, Sidebar are terrible and Team Cherry are amazing, but like, it seems like they have a higher capability to make something that is more polished, and won't succumb to at least the bug side of things, when it, ironically, given the game's all about bugs, that Sports Story did. I guess the question is like you said, can they recapture that kind of magical thing that happened when the original Hollow Knight came out? I don't know. I think a disappointing Silksong is almost like just another Hollow Knight game, you know, one that kind of does similar stuff but doesn't really push the boundaries. Yeah. And so I think that's probably where people would be disappointed, but I don't think people would be, you know, mad about it or anything. They'd be like, oh great, it's more of the same, but it's not pushing it.
There's never been a higher expectation for any indie game ever that I can think of.
Like, I don't think so, no.
This is insane levels, and that's partly because of how beloved Hollow Knight is and was, like how long it's been since Hollow Knight even came out on Switch, let alone PC, and like it's the hype that's built for this game is unlike anything we've seen, and you know, it's exciting, and to meet that expectation I think is an incredibly difficult goal, and I think if it even comes close, it's doing very well.
Yeah, I think the only other contender for that right now is Hades 2, right? Like, how do you follow up, like, literally a perfect video game, right?
Right, yeah, that's a good comparison.
And I think that was the interesting thing about reading what Supergiant said on their website about, like, look, we always try and challenge ourselves, and the most challenging thing we could do right now is make a sequel that has the same level of magic and intrigue and surprise as the original did. And I think that's the challenge for Silksong, is like, can it do that? Can Tears of the Kingdom do that, right? We have a few of these floating around right now of like sequels to games that are frankly some of the best ever made, and it's a huge amount of pressure, you know? I can only imagine Team Cherry sitting there, you know, as they sell millions and millions of copies of this game that they kickstarted, you know, a few years ago, and they're like this small thing from two people, and nowadays, like, the most wishlisted game on Steam, right? It's like so huge in so many communities, and you know, people are just clamoring for any bits of information about it, and for a small team like that, that's enormous pressure. Like, absolutely. Like, for Nintendo, it's fine. Like, Nintendo have that pressure constantly because they're used to it. They're always under those expectations. But I think also the idea that this just grew in scope, right? It started as a DLC, and then they were like, oh, we're going to make a full game, right? I think that also changes things of like, what, you know, how did they have to go and redo a bunch of stuff, right? Are they rebuilding a bunch of things? Because I think the DLC was supposed to like have a world that was attached to the current space, and so is it like a totally different thing? Have they kind of reworked everything? I don't know. It's interesting. From what we saw the most recent thing we saw was last year's Xbox summer conference, where they showed off another trailer, and yeah, it seemed pretty in line with what we would expect from it. But maybe it's just scope, you know? The original Hollow Knight is a huge game. Massive, like far bigger than most Metroidvanias are from a 2D perspective. And I wonder if they're just going large. Maybe that's the thing. Because they, the weird thing about Hollow Knight is Team Cherry initially seemed like a studio who could turn things around pretty quickly, right? They They put out a bunch of DLC for Hollow Knight very soon after it came out, and then they announced Silksong as a DLC pretty soon after, and they had it playable and at E3 in Nintendo's booth, like, very, very soon after that. Like, we've seen Hollow Knight Silksong be played live a bunch already, and so, like, what is the thing that's taking the time, right? That's the thing I'm really curious about, is, like, if they're taking this long on it, and they generally are pretty quick with development, they must be doing something big and different with it, right? Like, there has to be some kind of twist here, some kind of unique change that is going to really blow things out the water. So, in all honesty, the longer that it goes, the more faith I have in Silksong, especially when you see, like, Sports Story, came out after a while and still had a bunch of problems, and you're like, well, they probably should have kept it going in development for longer just to iron that out. It feels like they don't want to release something with Silksong that is going to be any less than, like, perfection day one from a kind of polished standpoint. So there's a lot of pressure.
And I think this time round, it seems like Xbox and Nintendo, particularly Xbox, are a lot more invested in Team Cherry with, like, their promotion and these kinds of things. So, like, I think if I was Team Cherry, I'd be feeling the pressure. Like, I think we're going to get, like, it's probably going to appear in Nintendo Direct as well as, like, some sort of Xbox showcase as
totally,
well.
Like,
they might have done a double deal or something. Like, there's a lot going on with the promotion and platforms that this game's coming to. I can't think of the same happening with a ton of indies, honestly. Like, there's just so much hype. So, and maybe Nintendo are slowing them down.
Yeah,
it's not out of the question.
Know. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games where, is it gonna come out still? I mean, probably on Switch still, right? Hopefully this year at some point. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's a launch title for Nintendo's next system at this point. Like, they've taken their time.
I think it'll launch on Switch.
Yeah, I think it will. Even if there is a new system, they're not going to ignore the install base of hundreds of million, almost. Yeah, there's like 100.
Are you confident they'll make it this year?
No, I'm not. Even though that Xbox thing was like, it's all in the next 12 months. I'm like, well, what about that Hollow Knight though? How about that one? I don't know if that's gonna work out or not.
I think it'll come this year. It'll come this year.
Yeah, I don't know. Stuff with Silksong and stuff with Tears of the Kingdom, and then you juxtapose that to what just happened recently with Hi-Fi Rush, and I'm like, fuck, man, why do we have these massive marketing, like, lead-up cycles? Because all it does is create this anticipation and these expectations that can ultimately not be met because of the hype cycle behind things, right? And the expectations that people, for so long, all they can do is imagine what this thing can be. And so, inevitably, when it gets in their hands, it's never gonna live up to what because their imagination has had so long to kind of extrapolate as to the possibilities, versus a game that's just like, anyway, here's this thing, you can play it today, here you go, and you're like, wow, okay, that's cool, right? Like, I think it's really interesting what Xbox have just done, and I wonder how that impacts the rest of the industry, honestly. How
much of an impact does Hi-Fi Rush make in the world without Game Pass, though? Because I don't think it creates much. Like, I think
that's true. Absolutely.
It's a big deal that game was able to come out and just be available to everyone with Game Pass. And I don't think Sony or Nintendo can do the equivalent with the marketing beat. I guess they can roll it into their equivalent of, Switch Online or PS Plus, whatever, but, like, they're very different services to Game Pass, and for Xbox to be able to release something so big and that's getting such great reviews to be there available day one is, I want to see more of that. That's the kind of thing, as like if you were like a Microsoft shareholder in Xbox or whatever, you'd be like very pleased with that strategy if they can keep churning it out,
I wonder how it's worked out for them. I do wonder, like, has the lack of a marketing cycle on that game hurt them at all, just because there is no familiarity with what that IP is? A brand new IP, it's a fresh new thing. Like, does that have drawbacks in any way? But I think when you have a platform as big as Xbox does, it probably kind of removes any of those barriers, I would imagine, from a marketing perspective.
And I think a lot of their downloads for Game Pass are quite secretive anyway, so we might not ever find out.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks, Chad. I think where I land is it'll be fine. It's all going to be good. Yeah, I really don't think we're going to see a sports story situation with Silksong, much as people are worried about it. I think the pedigree of the team, the time they've taken, what we've already seen, right? Because Sports Story, one of the problems was it was just clips from trailer, right? Like, it was short clips and you couldn't really get a sense of it. Go back to that E3 from 2019, was it? 2018? Nintendo's E3, where they play Silksong live. Looks fucking great. Like, plays fantastic, interesting mechanically, different. Like, it has that kind of level of polish that we expect. So, yeah, I think we're going to be just all right. Great. Well, our next email comes in from Noah. And Noah says, "Hey, Bally and Emmy said, as I'm sure you're aware, the RFN podcast crew are asking for Wii U Eshop game suggestions to play for their upcoming retroactive for episode 800. You can see this email is slightly late of us reading it because that happened a while ago now. But anyway, let's continue. Seeing as how you are both Wii U experts, I was thinking you both might have some great game suggestions for them to play. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to play the Wii U, so it's a part of Nintendo's history that I completely missed. As a result, I won't be able to suggest a game for them to play, but I knew you both would have some cracking ideas. Let's hear them. Best wishes, Noah. P.S. In episode 225, NBZ talked about his time playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, and you both expressed interest in playing through the game together in co-op mode before the end of the year. Since we're nearing the end of the year now, I thought I'd remind you. Well, we did it. We did play it in co-op. I think we played it like in August or something, maybe July last year. Yeah.
And we talked about it on the show as well.
We did.
It's there.
The Wii U Eshop Bally, both of our favourite places to be. You know my favourite thing about the Wii U Eshop? That little fucking minigame you played before while you're waiting for it to load to line up the things to get
love
them.
It. Once you get the timing down, you can just nail it every time.
You can nail it every time. It's so fucking satisfying. Like, it's like, oh, I got Rayman this time. Fucking nailed it. It's the best part. Also, the music was like pretty all right, but also like I like the layout of the Wii U Eshop. Like,
it's a good layout, it's a good music, and the selection of classic consoles is bar none the best that Nintendo have ever had. So like, it's a good eShop.
It is. It's solid, and it's almost dead. So we better figure out what we want to put on it before we go away for people. I think it's like March, right? So we almost are like a month or two away from that happening. I've pretty much bought everything I want, mainly from the 3DS, if I'm honest. Like Wii U eShop. I think the problem, right, with this question with Wii U generally is so many games are now on Switch that were on the Wii U. And eShop games, there weren't a lot of kind of exclusivity things going on there, right? There weren't a lot of games that were like, you can only ever play this on the Wii U eShop. So, like, you have to look to things that haven't been put across. The game that RFN ended up choosing was Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, which is a game that you can do on Switch, but you can't fully do on Switch because you can only play it in handheld mode. It would have to be constrained to just doing it in handheld mode, or you'd have to have some really bad control scheme where you use the motion on the Joy-Cons to draw lines on the screen via motion control, right? Yeah. Which sounds not very good, even though they could do it. Stuff like Star Fox Zero, right, where it's just the entire concept is built around two screens.
Star Fox Zero is my one for sure, yeah. That'd be my one that would be like, if you want to play one Wii U game that's very unlikely to be ported, or if it does get ported, will probably not be quite as good as the original, would be Star Fox Zero for sure. It's a controversial game, but I think that it's some of the best dogfighting I've ever played in video games. Like, there's a real unique lock-on system that then combined with the Wii U gamepad, you can like look around to Star Wolf and like start shooting him, and you can swap between the ship and the chicken walker. Like, it's some really good action in there. I was very impressed by that game.
Yeah, there's a couple of other games on there that I think I've always been interested in. Like, I kind of want to pick up Game & Wario before that goes away, right?
Oh, that's a really good shout, yeah.
Yeah, like, I remember looking at videos at E3 of people playing Game & Wario, and it seemed like a really weird, fun thing where, you know, there's that pirate one, I think, where you move the screen all across 360 around your space. It basically, like, has a panoramic camera, like, going around a space. Actually, remember at the beginning of the Wii U, wasn't there, like, a Google Maps thing where you could, like, have a panoramic camera with the Wii U gamepad and look around the space on Street View?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I completely blanked that out of my mind. It just suddenly came back to me. But yeah, that I wish there was a bit more of that stuff going on in the Wii U era, because that was like a cool idea that they never expanded in any way and never found like interesting uses. It's almost like, it's basically VR, but like a window into VR, almost like where the screen is basically the goggles and you can move it around to kind of pan around a space. Like, I think there's so much kind of potential in that idea, and they never really did much with it. But
yeah.
Game & Wario did have a game with it where it was like a pirate thing on the beat where you'd have to move it to catch like arrows shooting at you or like plungers shooting at the screen or something. That was something that I thought was kind of cool. And I although it's not like a full WarioWare thing, like it had some neat ideas. Like I think it had the gamer mode, right, from WarioWare, where you had to play on the gamepad and then you had to like put it away when your mum came in. Was that Game & Wario?
Oh right, yeah, that was a Game & Wario. Yeah, and
yeah,
it included obviously some of the micro games from the original WarioWare.
Yes, yeah,
very cool.
So like I think honestly, if I bought Game & Wario, it would be an afternoon of fun, and then I would never play it again. And for like, I don't know, is it 40 quid on the eShop right now? Probably. Is that worth me doing just for historical curiosity? Maybe. I don't know. I might want to try and find a physical copy of Game & Wario to dig into that at some point. But yeah, that for me is definitely, of like the first party Nintendo games, one I've been the most curious about. Like, it was a launch game and it just wasn't justifiable to buy it at launch. It didn't make sense. So I was like, yeah, maybe that's the one that I would do. But from like a kind of depth perspective and a discussion perspective, I don't think it would be that interesting of a game to choose, which I think is probably why they didn't go for it. Right. But yeah. Anything else, Bally, that sticks out to you?
I've got a couple. A game we really enjoyed. Maybe I enjoyed it more than you, to be honest. It's Affordable Space Adventures.
Yes. If we're talking about indie games that are exclusive to Wii U, that use the features of Wii U in a smart way, Affordable Space Adventures is really the only one, I would say. Like, really fun. It's the one that just kind of goes for it. And yeah, I think I like it more in hindsight than I did at the time. Like, I actually have good memories of, because it was just fun playing it together, right? But also we were recording it, and so that adds a weird layer to things as well.
So one person's got like the thrusters and the other one can kind of control the angle, and the abilities keep swapping because it's not just thrusters and angle. There's one bit where I think you have like a hook shot or something, and then there's one where it's like anti-grav, and you're constantly changing your roles. And I think on top of that, we did a thing where we made sure we changed every level or something just to make it even more complicated.
We went back and forth,
which was very fun. And yeah, a game unique to the Wii U. You can't play it anywhere else. So yeah, that's a really good. It's quite a short experience as well. I think like 3 to 4 hours, not too long.
I think it took us like 7 hours. Was it actually? It was. I remember it was 2 sessions. You came round to my house one day and we played like 3 something hours, and you came back again and we did another.
We do have a Let's Play on our YouTube channel of that entire game if you would like to watch it.
Exactly, so, including like off-cam footage at the end of the game where I get my phone out and record the Wii U gamepad and then put it in a little window to show the end of that game is really fun because you basically send a distress signal and you get to draw on the screen, and then you send it, and then it shows you at the end using Miiverse to fulfill this. It shows this fax machine with nobody there as like these endless pieces of paper fall from on top of it with everyone else's like distress signals. So you see a bunch of other people who had finished the game, their drawings and the things they had said at the end of the game. I think we did a thing where we were like, listen to TNL podcast or something dumb. We like did it like as a promotional thing, which was very, very funny. Like anybody would care. But that was a fun little thing. And yeah, I think you could play that game with 3 people.
Oh,
but
really?
You would, yes, but the third person would do like something even more minor that wasn't like as engaging. But yeah, it was a cool thing where, you know, someone is measuring the temperature and like doing the cooling and stuff on the gamepad while the other person controls and moves through. And it got complicated, a lot of kind of back and forth on that, trying to figure stuff out. But yeah, Affordable Space Adventures, I think if you're going to do a game that represents indie games on Wii U, that's like one with a bullet, I would say.
My final one I can think of that utilizes the Wii U gamepad in a very unique way that I really enjoyed. And I just had a really fun afternoon while I lived in Brussels playing this game one weekend. That's Star Fox Guard.
Oh, yeah.
So like this is weird. It's like Slippy's uncle, I want to say, or maybe it's his dad.
What's he called? Grippy, I think.
Grippy, yeah. Coming back to me now, and he's like orange with like a mustache. But yeah, it's tower defense, and you're basically setting up cameras and turrets essentially to stop these robots just kind of infiltrating your little maze that you're defending, basically. And you're switching between different cameras. It's kind of, this was showcased at an E3 a while back, where the idea was you'd play with a group of people and everyone would like watch their individual camera on a screen.
Right, yeah.
I just played it single player and it still worked pretty well. I had a great time. it's just a really unique, weird, definitely another one of Miyamoto's, like, I have to turn this into a game kind of, like, ideas that he was determined.
Yeah, I mean, it started as a project name, right? We had Project Giant Robot and Project Guard.
Right.
And those were the initial incarnations.
Giant Robot became a Nintendo Labo kit.
Yes, it did.
Meanwhile, Project Guard became a Star Fox spin-off.
Yeah, because if they don't know what to do with a game, they just slap a Star Fox skin on it, as
exactly.
we've seen a few times.
But yeah, it's just like if you're looking for like Nintendo history curiosity, like this is definitely up there on the Wii U, and I think it's a really good game actually. It's only like 4 or 5 hours long, and I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, it's a really good one, and easily forgotten about because it just came as a pack-in with Star Fox Zero. Was it on a separate disc to Star Fox Zero?
It was it? Maybe I downloaded it. I downloaded both of them, I want to say, to be honest. But there was some sort of offer where you'd get a big discount on one if you bought the other. So I did both of those. And then that linked to me getting some discount on Fire Emblem Fates or something, Birthright at the same time. It was very strange.
Yeah.
They didn't have their houses in a good order before the Switch came out, to be honest. So
yeah, for
it was
sure.
all over the shop.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, there are games that you can get in other places now. Stuff like The Swapper was a big one we both played, I believe, on Wii U. And Bit Trip Runner 2 was a huge one for the start of that system, where it was probably the first big high score game, I think, that we both got into in terms of like people on our friends list playing it. I remember that when I first got that game, I had a bunch of people from Nintendo World Report on my friends list, and so seeing their scores as everyone was playing it was good fun, and like trying to beat everybody's times and those sort of things going back and forth was awesome. Neither of us ever really played the NES remix games. Those are ones that I actually might want to go back and check out, honestly. I know they did like a collection.
Came to 3DS as well, like a different version.
Yeah, the 3DS had a collection,
right,
which was I think it basically took 1 and 2 and put them together, I believe. So that's probably a good thing to check out maybe before it goes away. I never played Scram Kitty. That was one that RFN always talked about. Scram Kitty and his buddy on Rails was an interesting kind of Wii U exclusive, which I think might actually be available in other places now. And, you got stuff like Art Academy, which was much easier on the gamepad. Dr. Luigi was obviously a Dr. Mario style game, but a Wii U version made for the year of Luigi, I believe. Nintendo's worst financial year of all time. Shout out to Luigi.
Is that true?
I think it might be one of the worst. Like I think 2013, right? So that was just after Wii U had launched, and it was the year of Luigi. It's pretty chaotic. It was 10 years ago.
14 or 15 must have been worse, but I hear you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think by 14 and 15 they had mobile games up and running, so Fire Emblem Heroes was probably making them, enough cash to get by. Yeah, I don't know. And then they did do a Pushmo game on Wii U, Pushmo World. So like, there's a lot of little things on there that were like iterations of stuff that were also on 3DS, but harder to get now. And I kind of got my fill with the first Pushmo, but they made a lot of those games and different spin-offs of those games. So if you wanted more, there was certainly more to go out and get. Yeah, I think overall it was, there were certain games like Teslagrad I remember being big on Wii U, right? Like certain indie games that kind of were the ones...
Teslagrad 2 coming out soon.
Yeah, but there were certain ones that, were a little bit more associated with the system because Nintendo did a bit of co-marketing with them, and, they had that whole Humble Bundle with stuff like, Sword and Soldiers and all these other things that were on there. So, I do think that there's a decent amount of small things that you can still check out from the Wii U eShop, but in terms of stuff that is worth going back to, it's vanishingly small now, I think, just because, everything's been moved over to either Switch or has been taken to other platforms at this point. So, I think we kind of talked through all the main ones that are worth talking about. And obviously Xenoblade Chronicles X is like the biggest one, but, that's one for... only certain people who want to put 100 hours of their life into a game and drive a Big Mac around. So
that and Star Fox Zero really are the only two left, aren't they?
If we're talking major ones, like Kirby, obviously the Rainbow Paintbrush,
okay,
but
yeah,
also,
right, yeah.
Game & Wario, stuff like that. Like as we kind of mentioned, and obviously Nintendo Land, like the game of the Wii U.
Yeah,
I would say like a top 3 Wii U game.
100%.
Still to this day.
Like,
do
you remember playing that in Aberdeen with everyone.
Yeah, like that entire weekend.
5-player, like asymmetrical multiplayer. That stuff was so good, especially like the Mario Chase and the Luigi's Mansion stuff like that. Those are some really, really cool games. Like, I would love to see more quirky stuff like that appear from Nintendo.
Absolutely. And hopefully they will do something. Yeah, I mean, again, that sequel to 1-2-Switch hanging about somewhere, so probably more likely that than Nintendo Land in the future. I think Nintendo Land scarred Nintendo in a lot of ways, like the whole fireworks thing at E3, that I think Kit and Chris have talked about that recently as well, and boy, it was not great. Didn't put things on the best foot starting forward for the Wii U.
I mean, it was a local multiplayer game in an era where everyone had still moved to online, right? Like, it was local only, I want to say. Like, I don't think there was any online functionality.
Yeah.
But
I mean, speaking of that, like, if you want a classic Wii Sports experience, Wii Sports Club was on Wii U as an exclusive, which is online play for Wii Sports games. Now Switch Sports exists and kind of is the same thing, but I don't know, you know.
Switch Sports is better than Club Sports, to be honest, in the sense that like, there's more games and things, but...
That's true. We had our fun out of Wii Sports Club for the free weekends and never buying it, and I think that was the right move, honestly. So
yes, we had our fill.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Noah, for that question, and thank you everybody else for writing in. We'll get to more of your questions in the future, but if you do want to send some in, and we do always need more, Bally, where can they send those emails?
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We always need more.
Wonderful stuff. I think we're going to get on out of here, so let's wrap things around. First things first, I'm going to remind you that we have the survey ongoing, so if you would like to participate and give us some feedback, some thoughts on the show, then please do so, and go ahead and fill that in, and you can help formulate what we're going to be doing going forward. Link in the description, on Twitter, all those different places. We would like to thank some folks for supporting us on Patreon, a place where you can go and get extra episodes, bonus stuff, thoughts on various topics. Bally, who are we thanking today?
We're thanking a couple of new patrons. They are Mason M and Ace. Thank you both for your brand new patronage. That's hugely appreciated. But we also like to thank our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, and Wicked Gamer UK Alan. But thank you to all of our patrons. We passed 50 patrons. We're up to 51 patrons, which is an awesome thing to shout about. And we'd like to thank everyone who's supported us. And thank you to everyone who has supported us in the past but doesn't support us any longer. Like, we still really appreciate all the support you've given us since we started our Patreon back in, I don't know, when was it?
It's a while ago. Who knows?
2020. So it's
so many years.
We've been going a while, so it's nice that, you know, the whole little Patreon community is growing, and you're getting access to those shows. So thank you.
Absolutely. So head on over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, and you can find a tier that is right for you. That's what they say, don't they?
Yes, there's so many tiers.
That's the verbiage. That's
definitely
the
verbiage. One tier will fit everyone.
Absolutely. You can obviously follow us in various places across the land, the magical world of the internet. I'm on Twitter at LordNBZ. You can find me over there. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Awesome. And you can follow the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast. That is a place you can go for updates about the show, surveys, links, things like that, as well as, you know, links to our YouTube channel and our Discord, both places you should check out if you want to, you know, have us up in a tab. There are some podcasts for me that are YouTube podcasts where I have them on my second monitor and I don't actually listen to them on my podcast feed. So, you know, we could be that for you if you want, as well as our Discord community, which is popping off right now in the Fire Emblem chat, let me tell you. A lot of activity going on. Obviously, lots of our community are into Fire Emblem, and it's been a lot of fun going back and forth with people, trying to, you know, figure out what the best builds are for characters, that sort of thing.
Seen some good use of spoiler tags. Very impressive use of those.
Loads of spoiler tags. You know, even though the story is not worth caring about spoiling, people are being good about it. So, you know, if you do want to chat with people in there and, you know, figure out, you know, what are the best things to give, what skills to pass down, those sort of things. Lots of nerds in there who will be able to help you out and, you know, tell you some stuff about what's going on in Fire Emblem. So check it out.
I'm enjoying the drama over in the Fantasy Critic channel.
Oh my god, don't tell me about it, Bally. Fucking hell. These motherfuckers, I thought I had Resident Evil 4 dead to rights, I tell you. I thought I had it.
$66 you
I
spent.
put in a massive bid. Only to be outbid by $70 from a service. I'm gutted. Frankly,
blind bidding is very fun.
Yes,
it makes you doubt yourself so many times.
Bally did make the greatest deal of the year so far, picking up Hi-Fi Rush in our emergency bidding session for a mere $16. A game which now has, I think, a 91, which is that's some easy points there, baby. That's very, very good tactics on your part, Bally. So
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I now have to figure out what to do because I don't have any of these games because I didn't bid enough for them. So
you got Fire Emblem Engage,
I did,
so
yeah.
You're leading the way with that.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, thanks everybody. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more video game chat, and so supposedly February, I don't know, there's some rumors going around about Nintendo Direct, so maybe we'll be talking about that sometime in the future.
Octopath Traveler 2 in February.
Yeah, lots of good stuff. So looking forward to it. And until then, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Emblem Engage from Fire Emblem Engage, copyright Nintendo 2023.